current terrorist environment is what we've seen is that religious motivations predominate. The question is why? Why now? In the recent past, in fact, during the last century, it was primarily ideological, racial extremism. That kind of violence was something that we sort of thought would continue forever, but it has largely ended. The ideological motivations of the past, for example, the communists, anarchists, and others, fascists, whoever it might be, those who engaged in that kind of violence believed that their secular, ideological program, or whatever it might be, belief system, was something that would bring freedom for them, for their group, freedom for their nation, whatever it might be, or at least domination for their group or for their nation. Well, what happened was the old ideologies fought their wars and then became mainstreamed, more or less. And the old communist insurgencies, there are still a few left, the old communist insurgencies were either fought and won or fought and lost, and that's what happened. What we saw, though, was in the Middle East, many of the Arab nationalists, many of the young people initially began flirting with Marxism or some other of the more secular mainstream ideologies. Or they were just purely nationalists, looking out for their own particular group, looking out for their own particular ethnicity. Well, those movements, in their minds, in the new generation's minds, did not bring them the freedom that they wanted, did not bring parity with Israel, parity with the West. In other words, they viewed the old nationalist and perhaps Marxist or socialist ideology as having failed them. And what we saw was a new generation coming in and adopting religion as their guide toward freedom, toward liberation. And we see examples in which the more religious motivations were relatively successful. The most prominent example of that is the war in Afghanistan against the Soviets. What happened was the Soviets invaded, classic conventional invasion. They overran the country, occupied the cities. They thought they had won the war, but then the war began. And when it began, it became a guerrilla war, an insurgency, but it was motivated by religion. The Islamists, the Mujahideen, the holy warriors, came from all over the world to fight in Afghanistan. And they beat the Soviet Union. The Soviet Empire collapsed afterwards. The way that Osama bin Laden and others presented that was, here we see religious motivation destroying an empire, and therefore we cannot be beaten. And that is the current reason, the current motivation behind some of the religious violence, religious insurgencies that are going on in the world. And the thing is, it's expanding, it's growing. We now see true insurgencies in North Africa, in Syria, in Iraq, and these groups are truly trying to form a new caliphate, a new religious state, if you will. The borders are not being recognized, and it's expanding. The new generation that is coming forward, that wants liberation, wants freedom, many of them are adopting the new Islamist approach to things. Now, the one problem that we see in the West is this. We tend to go into these situations and fight for 5 to 10 years, and then we declare victory and we say it's over. The Islamists are fighting for generations. They're raising children and grandchildren. This particular motivation, this religious motivation behind international terrorist violence, is not going to end anytime soon, and we need to be prepared for it.